The financial secretary says the city will see a deficit of over $100 billion this year. And Israel expanding its ground offensive to every part of the Gaza Strip. Hello and welcome to TVB News. Pro-democracy activist Agnes Chow, who was released on bail after being arrested for an alleged national security offense, revealed that she had moved to Canada and would not return to Hong Kong. Earlier, she received permission from Hong Kong authorities to study in Toronto on the condition that she return to the SAR to report to police during school breaks. Police condemned the irresponsible behavior and, without naming her, urged her not to become a fugitive and take, quote, a path of no return. Jackie Lin has our top story.
Agnes Chow, one of the most prominent faces during the city's 2014 pro-democracy protests and 2019 anti-extradition movement. Chow is also the co-founder of the now disbanded pro-democracy party Demosisto. In August 2020, she was arrested by National Security Police for alleged collusion with foreign forces and was later released on bail. The case involved media mogul Jimmy Lai and the alleged use of overseas accounts to support a group that called for foreign sanctions of Hong Kong. In a separate case, she was sentenced to 10 months behind bars in November 2020 for her roles in the protests outside the police headquarters in June 2019. After completing her jail sentence in June 2021, Chow has observed bail conditions for the national security-related case, including reporting to police regularly and surrendering her travel documents. Sunday night, Agnes Chow broke more than 2 years of public silence in a social media post, announcing that she had left Hong Kong to pursue a master's degree in Toronto, Canada in September. She said considering the situation in Hong Kong, her personal safety, her physical and mental health, she decided not to return to the city later this month and probably won't return to Hong Kong for the rest of her life. Chow denied that she deliberately deceived the police, but she's worried the police would bar her from leaving the city again for investigative reasons. In her social media post, Chow wrote she was asked by the National Security Department of the police to write a letter of repentance, saying she regretted her past political involvement and would never contact anyone from that sector again. As a condition to get her passport back, she was asked to make a one-day trip to Shenzhen in August with 5 national security police officers. She was taken to exhibitions about China's reform and development and tech giant Tencent's headquarters, where she was asked to pose for photos. Upon returning to Hong Kong, she was also asked to write a letter of thanks to police for arranging the trip. She received her passport in mid-September, the day before her departure to Canada.
When
asked if authorities would consider tightening bail conditions for national security-related cases in future following Chow's case, former Secretary for Security Lai Tong-kwok said police would scrutinize each case individually, with the same approach to considering whether to issue an arrest warrant over Chow. In a statement, police condemned the irresponsible acts that blatantly challenged law and order. Without naming Chow, the police appealed to the person involved to not choose the path of no return and bear the name of a fugitive for the rest of her life. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs also issued a strong condemnation. Its spokesperson Wang Wenbin said no one should have the privilege to be exempt from punishment after violating the law. Hong Kong and Canada used to have mutual legal assistance agreements in criminal matters, but Canada has suspended the agreement on the surrender of fugitives with Hong Kong in 2020. Jackie Lin, TVB News.
Today is Constitution Day. The SAR government and the Central Government's Liaison Office jointly held a seminar about the national body of laws. This seminar was themed, quote, the Constitution and Chinese modernization. In his speech, Chief Executive John Lee said it's necessary to groom a new generation of patriots to safeguard the nation's governance over the city. These young patriots should also have a global vision and the capability of promoting the country's modernization, he added. Zheng Yanxiong, director of Beijing's liaison office in Hong Kong, reiterated that national security is the prerequisite of the nation's modernization, and safeguarding it is the important constitutional duty of the SAR. On December 4th, 1982, The present Constitution of the People's Republic of China was adopted at the 5th session of the 5th National People's Congress, accorded with the highest legal status and legal effect in the country. Financial Secretary Paul Chan predicted the city will record a deficit of over $100 billion this year. He stressed the government is capable of tackling the challenge. The deficit figure makes up around 30 to 40% of the SAR's GDP. This, as the finance chief emphasized, the economic hurdle will be even higher next year. Chan also predicted Hong Kong's exports will continue to face pressure owing to unstable external economic conditions, but he said he remains hopeful for the SAR's future with the return of growth in personal consumption and tourism. The Israeli military today renewed its calls for mass evacuation from the southern town of Khan Yunis, where tens of thousands of displaced Palestinians have sought refuge. Israel is expected to widen its ground offensive, moving troops from the north to the south. This follows a week-long ceasefire that ended on Friday. More than 15,500 Palestinians have been killed in Gaza since Israel launched the war in response to Palestinian group Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel that resulted in 1,200 deaths. Nazvi Karim has more.
Israeli flares may be lighting up the sky over Gaza, but they bring with it only dark news. Move to safe areas, Israel is telling Palestinians. Khan Yunis in the south is a dangerous combat zone, leaflets dropped from the sky reportedly said. But it's a trap, says Hamas's Lebanon-based spokesperson Osama Hamdan during a press conference. He said the initial pre-truce order for Palestinians to move from the north to the south was simply Israel's way of concentrating the population in order to massacre them. As Israel's military prepares for an expected expansion of its ground assault, targeting Hamas infrastructure in the south, residents in and around Khan Yunis have been told to move west or south to Rafah on the border with Egypt. Airstrikes are now raining down across the Gaza Strip, with dozens of deaths in the Jabalia refugee camp in the north, as well as areas in Khan Yunis in the south. Hospitals are struggling to cope, said British-Palestinian doctor Ghassan Abu Sitta, who served in Gaza's Al-Ahli hospital for 40 days until November 18th.
The situation is absolutely catastrophic. I get asked, what's the difference between this war and the previous wars I had worked in Gaza or in Yemen and in Syria and Iraq. And it's the difference between a flood and a tsunami. You have been kind of almost engulfed by this dark wave of death when you were there. And then on the day that I left Ahli Hospital, we just ran out of everything. We could no longer put patients to sleep, and the operating room had to stop.
A 7-day truce ended on Friday after more than 100 Hamas-held hostages were released and around 240 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails were freed. Israel has since resumed intense airstrikes, and reports indicate its tanks and troops were closing in on southern areas of Gaza. US and Qatari officials say they are working hard to bring Israel and Hamas back to the negotiating table for a new truce. Meanwhile, Karim Khan, chief prosecutor for the International Criminal Court, said an investigation into Hamas's October 7th attack and Israeli forces' bombing of Gaza is a priority for his office. Khan, who met Israeli and Palestinian leaders, also expressed concern over extreme settler violence against Palestinians in the occupied West Bank and demanded more humanitarian aid into Gaza. The United Nations said around 108 trucks entered Gaza on Sunday, a fifth of the volume before the October 7th attack. Nazvi Karim, TVB News.
Ballistic missiles fired by Yemen's Houthi rebels struck 3 commercial ships in the Red Sea on Sunday. A U.S. warship in the region shot down 3 drones in self-defense during the hours-long assault, the U.S. military said. The Iranian-backed Houthis claimed responsibility for 2 of the attacks. The strikes marked an escalation in a series of maritime attacks in the Middle East linked to the Israel-Hamas war. NBC has the story.
U.S. defense officials confirming to NBC News the USS Carney responded after 4 attacks on 3 civilian ships in the Red Sea off Yemen At one point, the Carney shot down a drone heading toward it. The U.S. not sure whether the Carney itself was a target. One of the attacks hitting a British merchant ship. As the Carney sped toward it to help, the U.S. destroyer shot down another drone. 2 other civilian ships report they were hit, and the Carney shot down a third drone. Late Sunday, Iran-backed Houthis posting a video claiming responsibility for the attacks. Houthi rebels took control of much of Yemen in 2014 and were considered a terrorist organization by the U.S. government until 2021. The Houthis calling the Red Sea strikes a show of support for Palestinians in Gaza, part of a series of recent incidents in that region. This edited Houthi video with faces blurred that was released in November shows a helicopter landing on an Israeli cargo ship, armed soldiers quickly taking control and taking the ship back to Yemen. The USS Carney is part of the Gerald R. Ford aircraft carrier strike group, sent to the Mediterranean Sea after the Hamas attack in Israel. The Carney alone responsible for shooting down Houthi drones 3 times in the last 6 weeks.
It's a provocation. We'll see some reaction. But again, I think Secretary Austin will try and keep it below the threshold of causing wider war.
U.S. forces have also been facing threats on land. Bases in Iraq and Syria have come under attack by militia groups supported by Iran approximately 75 times in the last 2 months, injuring dozens.
A French man is facing charges of murder in connection with a terrorist organization. This after a German-Filipino tourist was stabbed and killed near the Eiffel Tower on Saturday. 2 others were injured in the attack. Named by prosecutors as Armand Rajabpour Mian Doab, born in 1997, authorities say he pledged allegiance to Islamic State in a video posted before the attack. The suspect was arrested and is in custody. Prosecutors confirmed he had been receiving psychiatric treatment and was under surveillance. His mother raised concern Armand was isolating himself, but investigators had found nothing illegal. Politicians held an emergency meeting to review the handling of the, quote, most dangerous individuals. The incident comes less than a year before Paris hosts the Olympics. President Xi Jinping met Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko in Beijing today. Xi spoke with Lukashenko for 3 hours at the Diaoyutai State Guest House. Saying he was glad to see his old friend, Xi said the 2 leaders agree on a pathway for the development of bilateral relations and have made significant progress in fostering projects in Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative. The Belarus economy is weighed down by sanctions because of Lukashenko's close ties with Russian President Vladimir Putin and his support of Moscow's invasion of Ukraine. Xi said he views China's relations with Belarus from a strategic long-term perspective and opposes outside forces interfering in the country's internal affairs. It is Lukashenko's 2nd trip to China this year, having visited in February. Still ahead, a volcanic eruption in West Sumatra in Indonesia, killing 11 climbers. And a broken engine fan blamed for yesterday's China Eastern Airlines flight diversion. Eleven climbers were found dead in Indonesia following the eruption of the Merapi volcano in West Sumatra. 3 people near the crater had to be rescued. Another 49 were evacuated. Several of them were rushed to hospital with burns. A smaller second eruption meant the search for 12 more missing climbers was suspended. They were in a group of 75 mountaineers that started an ascent on Saturday and got stranded. The almost 3,000-meter-high mountain has been sending ash 3 kilometers into the air since Sunday. Authorities have now raised the alert level and created a 3-kilometer perimeter around Merapi. Indonesia sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire and has 127 active volcanoes. Leading Chinese respiratory disease specialist Zhang Nanshan said he expects COVID infections to reach a peak this winter. However, fatal cases will remain low, he said, given that the XBB variant remains the mainstream strain. Zhang, a member of the Chinese Academy of Engineering, urged elderly residents and those suffering from chronic health conditions to get the booster vaccination. With the mainland experiencing a recent respiratory virus outbreak, health specialists say the cases will not evolve into a new wave of infectious disease. Timothy Lee tells us more.
A respiratory virus outbreak has recently swept across parts of the mainland, affecting mostly children. Some pediatricians said more than 10 such cases are being reported in the SAR each month. Professor Yoon Kwok-young from the University of Hong Kong's Department of Microbiology said according to data from the University of Hong Kong Shenzhen Hospital, infections have already been reported since the start of this year. The number of those infected gradually increased in May before reaching a high last month. Yu noted many children lack proper immunity to the virus after the city returned to normalcy, leading to some voicing their concerns about a similar outbreak in the SAR.
90.5%.
Yoon stressed that around 95% of those infected by the respiratory virus were below the age of 18. He said it is no cause for concern as long as tests are performed on those at the border showing signs of fever. Chinese Academy of Engineering academic Zhang Nanshan echoed Yoon's sentiments.
In terms of mycoplasma, pneumonia, or infection, I think nowadays in China, in particular in large cities, so it seems in Beijing, so in Children's Hospital, every day's outpatient clinic has a fever, so more than 1,000. So among them, the mycoplasma infection may be 20% or 30%. Plasma pneumonia is not difficult to be treated. People should not worry about that.
Zhang also predicted COVID infections in the mainland will hit a minor peak this winter. He called upon elderly residents and those with underlying conditions to receive the booster, noting the virus could worsen disease symptoms for at-risk groups. Yoon is also part of the Pandemic Research Alliance, along with health experts from Singapore, Australia, and Columbia University virologist David Ho. The alliance was formed to conduct research and prepare responses for the next potential pandemic. Timothy Lee, TVB News.
A Hong Kong-bound flight was diverted to Xiamen yesterday. Operated by China Eastern Airlines, the passenger flight was said to have experienced issues with its engine because of broken fan blades. It's so scary, said this woman who boarded the flight that departed from Shanghai on Sunday morning. Some online pictures show broken fan blades on the plane engine. Lo Kok-kung, a fellow of the Institution of Mechanical Engineers, said that was likely caused by metal fatigue. He said if some broken pieces of the fan blades hit the aircraft's body and affected the air pressure inside the cabin, it could lead to even more dire consequences. As Cathay Pacific and Hong Kong Airlines both have the same model of aircraft with the same engines, Lo urged the airlines to step up inspections to prevent any mishaps. That's the news. Pearl Magazine is up shortly. Bye for now.